Hi everyone, welcome back to my audiovisual channel. My name is Gabriela Handal, and today I'm going to do something that I meant to do. I'm going to review a book that I have read, this one, Ross King's The Judgement of Paris. And you would think that it's just, I'm amused by saying that I finished a book because I have been reading Dennis Dutton's The Art Instinct for I don't know how long. I'm going to have to start again. Anyway, the thing is that I want to review that one as well, but finished this one, I want to talk about it. I love this book a lot. The first time that I knew of this story in general, of this book, it wasn't an audiobook. I was modeling for a fellow artist, and we listened to the entire audiobook in the sessions. And the reason for which I liked it so much was because of how heavily it features Ernest Meissonier, who is a guy that you don't hear about really very often these days. Okay, the book is called The Judgement of Paris. It's written by Ross King, and I really like the way that he writes. I'm going to read you a couple of excerpts, one or two excerpts, which talk about my favorite part of the book, which feature, again, Ernest Meissonier. So let me give you first a really uncouth summary of the book, okay? Let's start with just the name of the book, The Kicks, okay? The Judgement of Paris is a Greek mythology story, first of all, and that's what it's named after, for a couple of reasons. But let me tell you about the story, the mythology itself first, okay? So this guy, Paris, was to be the judge of a contest, a beauty contest, basically, of which the contestants were Aphrodite, Athena, and Diana. I don't know if I got the names consistent there, but whatever. The thing is that he was supposed to choose which of these three goddesses was the most beautiful. And the three goddesses separately bribed him with different things. And Aphrodite bribed him with giving him Helen of Troy. Okay, so that's what he wanted. He chose her, and apparently this led to the events of the whole Trojan Wars. Okay? Now, the reason for which this book is called The Judgement of Paris is for two reasons. It's because Manet, who is the other artist that's heavily featured in this book, one of his paintings, and I don't remember the name, I have to look it up. Just give me a minute. And I think I'm gonna try to put up images on the video because I learned this stuff. Okay, so for the painting, for Manet's painting, one of the many that pissed everyone off, I don't know French, okay? So, whatever. Le Déjeuner sous l'herbe, originally entitled Le Bain, I don't know. Anyway, as Ross King tells it in his story, he references, Manet references for this painting in the poses of the characters in the painting. He references an image by Raphael, also called The Judgement of Paris. Okay, so then that's one reason for naming the book this. But I think perhaps the main reason for calling the book that, like the story, The Judgement of Paris, is because these two artists, Manet and Meissonier, were kind of like the protagonists of, his telling. They're set against Paris and the world, as Paris is about to come out of one of the empires, one of the Napoleon, I think it's Louis Napoleon. I don't remember the number. Okay, but the thing is that comes to an end very violently and humiliatingly at the hand of, they're not Germans yet, the Prussians. So then that's why it's called The Judgment of Paris, because, they were all luxury and whatever, and just, cafe au laits and stuff, And that's, maybe I'll read that part as well. Otto von Bismarck makes fun of the French because of, the softness they've come to because of all of this luxury and comfort. And he's like, oh no, they're not going to last a week if they can't get a cafe au lait. It's pretty funny. Okay. So, yes. So then that's more or less a summary. So then the book features then these two main characters and the things, Manet and Meissonier. Manet as kind of like the modern sort of guy, like the new guy, the new kid in town, the rebel, and the ingenious, the new, whatever, And Meissonier, it's like, oh, traditional, old, on the way out. Everyone is just tired of his shit, this type of stuff. But at the same time, I also think he kind of does a fair job of also mentioning that they, Meissonier was also ahead of his time in several things. And Manet was holding on to tradition, or very respectful and admiring of tradition in his own ways as well, because he loved, for the painting Labaine, he references Raphael, and apparently in lots of other paintings he references the great masters because he loves those paintings. So then, I think Ross King does a pretty fair balancing of providing that information to, to us, the readers, to remind us that Manet was not that there's kind of these arguably contradicting elements in the characters that are being presented to us in the book. So, I'm not sure how much I should go into the Manet versus Meissonier story. Manet made a bunch of paintings that pissed everyone off, not just the judges at the salon where he submitted the work, but also just the public in general. And Meissonier, while he was alive, was very well loved, very well admired. He sold his paintings for record amounts in his time. He was known just as like the best painter of France, and somehow the tables got turned or something. There's something about that at the end of the book, and I don't quite remember what it was right now. Like, why was Meissonier like scorned basically not that long after he died? But okay. So, as usual, I am kind of winging it. I didn't even take notes or anything. Although I guess, I put little thingies here that I want to... I'm not going to read all of that to you, don't worry. I'm only going to read to you two things. But I guess I just want to try to mention a little bit more about both Manet and Meissonier. So okay, yeah. The way that Manet is a traditionalist, or, arguably conservative in a way, is that he's always referencing... maybe not always, but often referencing old master paintings in his own work. And one of the ways in which Ernest Meissonier is ahead of his time is because he loves plein air painting and working from life. I think the working... I'm not super clear on that yet, but I think that the working from life part isn't as much like for the finished work as much as it is for studying and making studies and then basing the final work on the studies, but not directly making the finished work based on an image that you posed from life. I'm not entirely clear on that, so don't quote me or something. And Manet's work was kind of haphazardly put together, even though, again, he copied work of the great masters. He made copies. That was a normal part of studying, much like it is now in a lot of ways. But a lot of his work is really rather haphazardly put together and kind of hasty. It's kind of hasty and it's kind of blocky, and that's just an example of the criticism that he got at the time. I think one of his, if not like the worst painting is, it's not here, I don't remember what it's called, but it's a bull ring scene where the perspective is terrible. Manet got made fun of because the like there was like a tiny bull and a small person and a tiny bull, and it's like, oh, the matador got killed by a mouse or something because the perspective was so ridiculous. So, you know, what was Manet's intention with the depicting things the way he did? But, you know, I mean, for my taste, for example, there's the painting of Jesus and like the two angels. I think there's things that are really good in that painting. In Olympia, for example, I think the hand of Olympia, I mean, I think he was good at his hands are well done, I think. Or at least very often there's that. That's one of the things I've taken note of his work when I have looked at it. In the painting Labaine, the naked woman is supposed to have she's supposed to have really offended the judges and everyone because she was ugly or something. But like again, I think the arm upon which she is resting her head and her hand, I mean, I think the portrait is fine as well. And I mean, the way he did the musculature of the leg, you know, I like that. And I like the folds that he did, you know, so I don't know. And like this whole thing of the clothes and the fruit spilled like beside the woman in the foreground in this painting, I also like that. And you know, like maybe she's blown out. It's like she has like really strong white light on her and stuff, and maybe that, you know, I don't know. I think that's like a characteristic of some of his the figures that he paints, that they don't have a lot of, you know, like these delicate peaks and valleys that you often see in the body note, you know, if you have a nice lighting situation. Whereas Meissonier was meticulous as hell. He was very studious. He wanted to depict things accurately. He wanted to just know what things, he wanted to be familiar with the shape of things and know exactly what they looked like before he put them in his paintings. And I remember when I first listening to the audiobook about all the stuff that he went through in order to, you know, when working for his painting Friedland, because he has galloping horses in this book, in this painting. Just that endeared me so much to the guy and made me admire and respect him so much. Like that dedication, it's like, you know, it's just really cool. And it makes me think of the way that I feel about human anatomy, for example. I'm not nearly as studious as he was, but, you know, for example, it made me feel like if my husband was a painter, he would be like that. He would want to be very correct and exact and accurate when depicting his work, when, you know, making his work. Okay, so maybe I will, oh, and where was I going with that? Yeah, just talking about a little bit about both, I guess. So, yeah, so Meissonier was big on sketches. He had like an obsession with just sketching all the time, you know, according to the author. And he did lots of studies. He had the uniforms of the French army, and they gladly lent him things and posed for him and all of this stuff. And even though he didn't make gigantic paintings like it was appreciated by the Salon, they still loved his work and welcomed it and admired it and praised it. All right, so I think I'm going to go ahead and read to you about Meissonier. And I want to talk specifically, I want to read to you specifically the excerpts. The excerpts that I want to read you are specifically about this painting Friedland and how he went about depicting the horses. So I'm going to read to you first. All right, just give me 1 minute, please. Okay, so these two chapters kind of talk about this. This one's called Maneuvers. It's chapter 23. Let me see how long it is. Maybe I'll just read the whole thing. No. Too long. All right. Chapter 23, Maneuvers. Let me get closer to the mic. Ernest Meissonier sometimes rode all the way through the forest of Saint-Germain, along the Route de Lorraine, to emerge on the south side in the ancient town of Saint-Germain-en-Laye. Only a few miles west of Paris, Saint-Germain-en-Laye was home to a cavalry garrison, the 10th Regiment Cuirassiers, whose commander, Colonel Dupersois, was a friend of Meissonier. A portly man who loyally trimmed his beard and waxed his mustache in the style of Louis Napoleon. The 51-year-old Dupersois was an experienced cavalry officer who had served in both the Dragoons and Carabineers. During several of Meissonier's visits to Saint-Germain-en-Laye, Dupersois obligingly put a company of his gros frères through their paces as the painter watched attentively from his saddle. Edouard Manet was therefore not the only painter for whom troops of soldiers were taking time away from their training to strike dramatic poses. More than 4 years after starting his work, Meissonier was still doing his best to capture the flash of swords at the Battle of Friedland. Unlike Manet, Meissonier had no subversive intentions with his painting. On the contrary, he wished to glorify Napoleon Bonaparte, the cuirassiers who had fought for him at Friedland, and by implication, the fighting spirit of the French military across the decades. This lofty aim, together with Meissonier's reputation as France's greatest painter, made Colonel Dupersois and his men only too happy to assist him in whatever way they could. Meissonier had already been studying charging horses with the help of his son Charles on their early morning jaunts through the forest of Saint-Germain. The pair would take their horses along the wide, brittle path leading from Poissy to Maisson-Lafitte, 5 miles to the east. We thought we had got far enough away and were alone, Charles later recalled. My father would say to me, "Make your horse gallop." Then putting his own horse at the same pace and keeping on the opposite side of the road, he would study each movement. Meissonier was attempting to capture, according to Charles, the rhythm and successive modifications of the horse's action. These experiments in equine locomotion were continued on the parade ground at Saint-Germain-en-Laye. According to Charles, a witness to these grand reenactments, the cuirassiers were delighted to demonstrate all the massed movements that might furnish him with as close an image as possible of war with its furious bursts, its hand-to-hand encounters, its charges, its melees. Meissonier may have earned their respect with his own adept horsemanship, since he rode his own steed alongside the charging cuirassiers, gazing as if hypnotized, according to Charles Iriarte, and then frantically noting down everything he witnessed. Besides demonstrating their attack formations and the secrets of hand-to-hand combat, the cuirassiers had another task to perform for Meissonier. He requested that they and their horses trample a field of wheat. Just as the campaign of France had required him to break across the grounds of the Grand Maison vast quantities of flour to double as snow, his work on Friedland demanded a battered crop of ripening wheat, the landscape on which the incident depicted had taken place. Iriarte claims Meissonier purchased an entire field over which he hired horsemen from a cavalry company de Tron. Another of Meissonier's friends, Albert Wolff, likewise a writer for Le Figaro, maintained that the painter actually planted the crop in his park at Poissy, then hired the horsemen to flatten it once June. The month of the battle had arrived. Whatever the exact circumstances, Meissonier had assembled his easel in the middle of the field and made plein-air sketches of the ears of wheat scattered across the ground. These studies seem to have been completed in 1867 or the first half of 1868. Meissonier included one of them in a portrait he began in early 1868, that of Gaston de la Hante, owner of the Campaign of France. The banker posed for the portrait not at his own mansion, in what amounted to a kind of advertisement for Meissonier's taste in interior decoration, in one of Meissonier's antique Louis XIII chairs with a carved trunk beside him and a tapestry on the wall behind. Also in the background was an easel with a sketch of Friedland clearly visible, while a piece of paper lying casually on the floor proclaimed Gaston de la Hante, Ernest Meissonier, 1868. The cost to de la Hante was 25,000 francs, one of the highest prices ever paid by a sitter for his portrait. De la Hante could not fail to notice how Meissonier's latest masterpiece was proceeding. But when he expressed an interest in acquiring Friedland, he learned how the painting was already spoken for. The buyer was not Henry Probasco, who had returned to Cincinnati with tens of thousands of dollars worth of books and other treasures, but without, however, getting his hands on Friedland. His offer of 150,000 francs had been topped by a bid from Lord Hertford that seems to have been in excess of a stratospheric 200,000 francs. At this price, Friedland cost more than double the amount ever paid for a painting by a living artist. To put this sum into perspective, 20 years earlier, Alexander Dumas' Père had spent 200,000 francs constructing his Château de Monte Cristo, a lavish Renaissance-style castle featuring a moated studio, statued by James Pradier, and a Moorish salon carved by a team of craftsmen specially imported from Tunisia, while Le Moniteur once reported that 200,000 francs could support a brigade of soldiers, some 2,000 men, for as long as 6 months. The price tag of 200,000 francs was therefore an extravagance even for the man who owned Bagatelle, the beautiful chateau built for Marie Antoinette in the Bois de Boulogne. The Universal Exposition of 1867 and the months following its closure at the end of October comprised for Meissonier a kind of annus mirabilis in what had already been a miraculously successful career. If he entertained any worries about his finances, and his passion for aggrandizing his property at Poissy certainly gave him a few anxious moments over the years, then the 200,000 francs would happily lay these to rest. And if he retained any worries about his critical reputation, he could rejoice in the assurances of the many critics who claimed he possessed, in the words of Charles Blanc, no equal, either in France or anywhere else. His career had reached a magnificent peak by the time he celebrated his 53rd birthday in February. He also relished other domestic delights, since he would mark his 30th wedding anniversary later in the year, a few weeks before his son Charles, who had succeeded in winning the hand of Jean Rose, was due to marry. Charles himself seemed poised to become a great success as a painter, a worthy heir to his father. Not only had, while taking tea, been awarded a medal at the 1866 Salon, but Charles was celebrated by the reviewer for the Revue du 19th Century as an artist whose talents seizes you with its lively charm, which harbors sharp and rigorous drawing, and which bursts with the right color, youthful, stimulating, harmonious, virile, and truthful. Buoyed by so many accomplishments, Meissonier was unprepared for the rebuke he was about to receive as the Salon of 1868 approached. I want to leave it at that for this chapter. Hopefully, you can see what a great, how enjoyable the writing of Ross King is. It's just, I just think he's a good writer. It's entertainingly written, but not like ostentatious or superlative, and I don't know. Anyway, so that's one excerpt. And let me read you another excerpt. Maybe I should just finish that chapter. It's not that long. All right, if I'm going to read a whole chapter, I think I'd rather read the one I like the most. So let's move on to the next excerpt, which is all of chapter 27. Is that reasonable? Yeah, that's reasonable. Okay, because I also think it'll display more of King's writing, because he does this thing where because as I said earlier, the book is kind of set against the background of France's social, political, just the history of the time, which is really interesting, and just very interesting to see what these people, what these two individuals, Manet and Meissonier, are doing besides being artists, like their daily life, or what is happening around them, what they're doing, who are they talking to, like this type of stuff. And so that's not the only thing that King talks about, because he does a thing where it looks like he's going off on a tangent, but he's not, because it's about the world building, basically, that he's doing for you. He's talking about Napoleon, the Napoleon of himself of the time, and who was handling the salons at the time, the French salon at the time, a guy called Neuerkirch, I think. There's a really great drawing of him by Ingres. Is like, my God, what a beautiful drawing. Anyway, okay, so let me read you this chapter, which hopefully displays better King's writing. Yes. Okay. All right, so chapter 27, Flying Gallops. This chapter is the best, by the way. It's an awesome chapter. Okay. In November 1868, Meissonier's son, Charles, married Jeanne Gros, and within weeks the new bride was pregnant with Meissonier's first grandchild. Charles and Jean, took possession of the Nouvelle Maison, whose refurbishment Meissonier was still faithfully and extravagantly superintending. The 25,000 francs from Promenade at Antibes sold a few weeks after the wedding, were a welcome infusion of cash, as Meissonier attacked this new architectural enterprise with his customary gusto. Charles soon found himself on the end of relentless inquiries from his father regarding kitchen sinks and whether the house should feature a tower or a gable. Another construction project was also taking shape in the enclosure of the former abbey. Though Meissonier claimed to detest the modern industrial age, with his ever more adventurous studies of equine locomotion, he was actually working at the cutting edge of science. He was regarded by most critics in France as the greatest horse painter in history, having overcome all rivals, as Gautier once proclaimed, in a single blow. His skill in depicting horses had been gained through years of studying the equine form. He had even gone so far as to take courses in anatomy at the École Nationale vétérinaire in Maissons-Alfort, a few miles southeast of Paris. His dedication impressed not only the artistic but also the scientific community. What efforts, what sketches, what lengths of precious time, what fatigue he incurred to faithfully translate the living animal, exclaimed the anthropologist Émile Duhousset. Meissonier regarded himself as something of a scientist in these matters, a hippologist who was attempting to quantify the precise proportions and locomotions of the horse. He believed that the ancient Assyrians had grasped this movement, but that their knowledge had been lost until he, Meissonier, revived it through his endless researches. Equestrian experts were inclined to agree. In one of his theatrices on equine anatomy, Duhousset wrote that Meissonier's motion studies for the campaign of France had managed to differentiate, for example, for the first time in history, between a walk and a trot. He claimed Meissonier showed how horses walked by moving in unison legs that were diagonally opposed to one another, right front and left back, for example, while flexing their knees only slightly. Meissonier was nevertheless finding the horses in Friedland more difficult to paint than those in the campaign of France. The reason was that this latest work called for galloping horses. Galloping horses were not usually a problem for painters. Throughout history, the task of the artist had not necessarily been to observe reality and then attempt to match it perfectly in his work. Instead, painters created their images by using various tried and trusted conventions, ritualized gestures and symbolic expressions that satisfied demands for verisimilitude by assimilating the visual representation with the beholder's perceptions. Galloping horses were a case in point. Artists habitually showed them performing what was known as a flying gallop, a hobby horse pose in which the forelegs stuck out front and the rear legs behind. People happily accepted this depiction of a gallop because it seemed to match their impressions of what they saw at, for example, the racecourse. Edward Manet, a painter with no interest in depicting motion, had used precisely this artistic cliché for his horses in the races at Longchamp. Meissonier was not content with this convention, which he suspected did not properly reflect how a horse actually galloped. The man who refused to paint so much as a shoe buckle without first having a correct example before his eyes would not execute something as complex as a charging horse unless he had an image of its gait perfectly in his head. But the problem he found was comprehending the exact movement and disposition of the horse's legs as it galloped, what Charles called the rhythm and successive modifications of the horse's action. For instance, did all four hooves leave the ground simultaneously? If so, which was first to land, a foreleg or a hind leg? And were both forelegs ever outstretched from the torso as depicted in the flying gallop? Rose Bonheur had spent 18 months visiting horse markets and abattoirs to create the Horse Fair, her masterpiece of equine muscle and movement. Meissonier would ultimately go to even greater lengths in his quest to delineate sequential movement. Nature, he once wrote, only gives up her secrets to those who press closely. He had, therefore, made sketches of Charles racing through the forest and of the 10th Regiment cuirassiers charging in attack formation across the parade ground at Saint-Germain-en-Laye. But there were limitations to these approaches. The rapidity of these motions made them difficult to seize, lamented Charles. Meissonier found he needed a more effective method of ascertaining how a horse moved its legs as it galloped. Unfortunately for Meissonier, the technology required for these motion studies, a multi-exposure camera, was still just out of reach in the late 1860s. A young surgeon and physiologist named Etienne Jules Marie had recently set up a scientific laboratory in the Rue de l'Ancienne Comédie, where he used his instruments to measure and then analyze the movements of amphibians, birds, and insects. He was particularly interested in flight, inventing a special girdle that allowed a bird to fly around in circles as the motions of its wings and torso were recorded. In 1864, he had been visited in his laboratory by the ingenious and inventive Nadar, who a year later began experimenting with moving pictures, taking a revolving self-portrait by photographing himself a dozen times as his chair was slowly rotated through 360 degrees. More promisingly, by 1869, an astronomer named Pierre-Jules César Janssen was at work on what he called a revolver photographique, a multi-exposure camera based on the principle of Samuel Colt's repeating pistol. Janssen envisaged a rotating wheel that could be fired at regular intervals in order to admit light into the shutter and allow a photographer to take as many as 48 exposures in 72 seconds. This sort of stop-action photography would have been absolutely invaluable to Meissonier in his researches into galloping horses. However, Janssen was not expected to have his invention ready for 1874, when he hoped to take it with him to Japan to photograph the transit of Venus. Meissonier was therefore forced to adopt other methods. And so he turned his garden upside down, according to one visitor, and began building a railway through it. France had more than 11,000 miles of railway track in 1869. In the previous 3 decades, the railway had transformed the nation more than any other single invention. It had stimulated the economy, created new social relations, and transfigured the urban environment as metropolitan life began to revolve around the train station more than, as previously, the church or the town hall. The railway had likewise influenced artists, in particular landscapists, by bringing the forest of Fontainebleau and more remote destinations such as the coast of Normandy within easy reach of their Paris studios. It had also, like photography, caused a shift in visual perception by altering the relationship between the viewer and the physical landscape, across which one would suddenly travel at speeds in excess of 50 miles per hour. It could be argued that the hasty-looking landscapes of Monet and Pissarro owed something to the brief vistas glimpsed as they loomed and then dissolved in the window of a train carriage. One critic of the Batignolles painters complained, at any rate, that Monet paints as if from an express train. Even so, the most eccentric contribution of railway technology to the history of art was surely Meissonier's miniature railway at Poissy. Meissonier had a team of workmen lay a set of iron rails in grounds that had formerly featured only the bucolic delights of cherry trees and grazing livestock. He next installed on his track a small carriage, or what one witness called a wagonette, and another a rolling sofa. Parallel to this length of track, he fashioned a brittle path among which a horse would gallop. With these 2 lengths of course complete, he climbed into the wagonette, whose motive power was not steam or even horses, but a pair of men. These 2 unfortunates were ordered to push the painter as quickly as possible along the rails in his wagonette as a horseman galloped full pelt down the brittle path beside them. This bizarre feat was performed time and again as Meissonier whizzed along the track with pencil and paper in hand, jotted down the action, the strain of the muscles, every detail of the motion, and the different transitions. Entire albums were filled with these scribbled observations. One of his friends claimed that Meissonier thereby succeeded in decomposing and noting, in a flash, the most rapid and complex actions of the horse's flying legs. Without a high-speed camera, however, Meissonier was like a naked-eye astronomer, a Tycho Brahe, staring at the night and counting stars before the invention of the telescope. Not for another 10 years, when Edward Muybridge finally managed to use a high-speed camera to capture a horse's motion photographically, would these rapid and complex actions truly be understood. Nevertheless, that a man so bewitched by the past, a man who claimed to detest the sight of railway stations, should have spent so much time and effort hurling himself down a railway track in a quest for the latest scientific knowledge provides a delicious irony. Meissonier's researches into the articulation of a horse's leg as it cantered or galloped were 19th century equivalents of Leonardo da Vinci's sketches of bats and birds or Michelangelo's dissections of the human body. In each case, scientific observation was pressed into the service of art, and art into the service of science. With Michelangelo, for instance, in his quest to depict physical perfection, mapping the anatomical structure of the human body more accurately and explicitly than anyone before him, Meissonier was no less committed to his own task. He became the first painter in history, according to one of his friends, to bring a scientific knowledge of anatomy to bear on the artistic treatment of the horse. The 1869 Salon took place, like the one in 1863, against the background of elections for the Legislative Assembly. The political climate in France had altered dramatically in the intervening 6 years. Not only had the emperor's reputation been damaged by his ill-judged foreign policy initiative in Mexico, but the economy had begun to contract after years of growth. The silk industry was suffering from an epidemic of pebrine, the wine industry from phylloxera, and the banking industry from a grève du milliard, the strike of the billions, whereby nervous financiers ceased to invest their wealth, causing the collapse of banks such as the Crédit Mobilier, the value of whose shares had tumbled in 1867 from 1,982 francs to 140. Even worse for the emperor was the fact that the relaxation of the press laws in 1868 meant the Republican opposition, always a powerful force in Paris, had at last been unmuzzled. La Lanterne, an inflammatory anti-government journal edited by Henry Roquefort, had become so provocative and so successful that the government took action after only a few issues and, liberal laws notwithstanding, closed it down. But dozens of other journalists also began whipping themselves into a vituperating frenzy. The result, in Paris at least, was that almost every night for weeks on end witnessed packed electoral meetings, followed by demonstrations, riots, and the forcible scattering of the angry protesters with batons and cavalry charges. French artists, however, were more sedate in 1869, thanks largely to the fact that a wide majority had work accepted for the Salon. Many of the painters from the Salon of Newcomers returned in 1869. Camille Pissarro had 2 views of Pontoise accepted. Renoir had a portrait of his mistress, Lise Triot, and Degas had a former ballerina, Josephine Gauguelin. But Degas also had one of his canvases rejected. Berthe Morisot submitted nothing, while Cézanne and Alfred Sisley each had both their works turned down. The 1869 Salon had another notable absentee. Claude Monet reached a low ebb following Neukirch's insistent rejection of one of his 2 paintings in 1868. He had moved that summer to Bonnières-sur-Seine, 25 miles north of Paris, where an unpaid bill resulted in his eviction from an inn and a half-hearted suicide attempt as he threw himself into the river. Fortunately, no harm was done, he wrote a day later to Basile. His fortunes then briefly waxed after he managed to show some of his canvases at an exhibition of maritime art in Le Havre, and sell his portrait of Camille, shown at the 1866 Salon, to Arsène Houssaye, the editor of L'Artiste, for 800 francs. However, the authorities in Le Havre seized 4 of his paintings from the walls of the exhibition and auctioned them off to pay his numerous creditors. These canvases were knocked down to a buyer for 80 francs each, an astonishing bargain considering that a new unpainted canvas cost a little less than half that. Monet had moved in the autumn to a rented house in Étretat, on the Normandy coast, not far from Le Havre. There, buoyed by a visit from Gustave Courbet, his spirits quickly improved. "I'm very happy, very delighted," he wrote to Bazille. "I'm surrounded here by all that I love. Despite being refused credit at the paint shop, his reputation had obviously preceded him, he managed a winter scene, the Magpie, which he painted out of doors on a day so cold that he was forced to bundle himself into 3 overcoats, light a brazier beside his easel, and wield his paintbrushes in gloved hands. A few months later, having moved back to Paris, he submitted the Magpie to the Palais des Champs-Élysées, along with fishing boats at sea, another product of his Étretat sojourn. This time, both paintings were rejected. Monet was furious. "That a fatal rejection has virtually taken the breath out of my mouth, the bread out of my mouth," he fumed in a letter. The dealers had all turned their backs on him, he noted bitterly, notwithstanding his extremely modest prices. Edouard Manet enjoyed more favor from the 1869 jury. Both the balcony and the luncheon were accepted, but he was anxious about their possible reception following so many discouraging experiences. On the first day of the salon, Berthe Morisot discovered him loitering nervously in room M, with his hat on his bright sunlit On the first day of the salon, Berthe Morisot discovered him loitering nervously in room M, with his hat on in bright sunlight, looking dazed. Morisot, who had come to the Palais des Champs-Élysées with her mother, was not showing work in 1869. Though 130 women were exhibiting at this salon, Morisot had been unable to join them since she was suffering from an eye infection that prevented her from completing her work on time. This infection made it difficult for her to see the paintings on the wall, but Manet begged her to gauge their effect, as he did not dare move a step. "I have never seen such an expressive face as his," she later wrote to her sister Edma. He was laughing, then had a worried look, assuring everybody that his picture was very bad, and adding in the same breath that it would be a great success. Morisot made her way to where the balcony was suspended on the wall. "It seems that the epithet femme fatale has been circulating among the curious," she reported to Edma about her own appearance in the work. Manet, in high spirits, then gallantly escorted her through the other rooms in the Palais des Champs-Élysées. The party soon became separated in the press of the crowd, at which point Morisot became sensible that it was not proper for a woman such as herself to walk around alone. "When I found Manet again, I reproached him for his behavior. He answered that I could count on all his devotion, but nevertheless he would never risk playing the part of a child's nurse." With her sessions for the balcony complete, Morisot's relations with the man she quickly came to regard as a mentor had become slightly fraught. "I think he has a decidedly charming temperament," she wrote to her sister following this particular encounter. "I like it very much." But in many ways, the gentle, insecure Morisot was ill-equipped to deal with a character such as Manet. Though he may have looked the part of the gentleman with his lemon-yellow gloves and an ubiquitous cane, Manet could sometimes be guilty of unpleasantly boorish behavior. He dominated the Café Gerbois, and his various other haunts with a kind of tyrannical wit. "He was naturally sarcastic in his conversation and frequently cruel," wrote one friend. "He had an inclination for punches, cutting and slashing with a single blow. He was the strangest sight in the world, his elbows on the table, throwing about his jeers with a voice dominated by the accent of Montmartre, close to that of Belleville." Clever insults delivered in an effective working-class accent may have gone down well in male company, but Morisot, more accustomed to tutelage from the genial pipe-smoking Papa Corot, found them extremely hurtful. Manet, she once admitted to Edma, has said many unpleasant things to me. By the time of the 1869 Salon, moreover, the uneasiness between Manet and Morisot was exacerbated by the presence of another young female painter, a 20-year-old named Eva Gonzalez, who had become Manet's first and only student after entering his studio in February. The daughter of a Spanish-born novelist, Eva possessed beauty, elegance, breeding, and intelligence, and even some talent as a painter. She swiftly became Morisot's rival for Manet's affections and attentions. As it transpired, Manet had good reason to be nervous about the reception of his paintings. The attacks on the painter each spring in the French newspapers were becoming a regular event, an annual ritual like the Poisson d'Avril, or the Grand Prix de Paris. The 1869 Salon brought yet another volley of abuse. Though Théophile Gautier wrote that the two works are relatively sensible and will create no scandal, other reviewers found plenty of reasons to inveigh against them. A writer in the Gazette de France rather cruelly picked out the figure of Léon in the luncheon. The painter of Olympia and her cat seems to have laboriously plumbed the depths of human ugliness to extract the distressing figure which he shows us in the foreground of his luncheon. Most severe of all was a 34-year-old German playwright and journalist named Albert Wolff, recently appointed chief art critic of Le Figaro. Manet thinks he is producing paintings, but in fact he does nothing but sketches, wrote Wolff, voicing the familiar complaint against painters of the generation of 1863. He lacks imagination, Wolff added. He will never accomplish anything else, you can count on it. Even Castanery, one of the country's more progressive reviewers, found both paintings meager and sterile. His review in Le Cycle, a left-leaning paper with 40,000 readers, went so far as to suggest that Manet required more training in order to improve his technique. Having endured the humiliation of this latest batch of lacerating reviews, Manet lapsed into the usual depression. Poor Manet, he is sad, Berthe Morisot wrote to her sister. His exhibition, as usual, does not appeal to the public, which is for him always a source of wonder. Such failure caused Manet embarrassment as well as wonder. Morisot's mother noted how he met in the street people who avoid him in order not to have to talk about his painting, and as a result, he no longer has the courage to ask anyone to pose for him. Still, Manet did summon the courage to ask one person. Before the summer was out, he had begun, much to the annoyance of both Morisot and her mother, a portrait of Eva Gonzalez. The elections for the Legislative Assembly took place on May 24, 3 weeks into the Salon. Though the candidates supporting the emperor managed to win 216 of 292 seats, there were causes for concern in the Tuileries. Not only had 25 Republicans been elected, including Adolphe Thiers, but 42% of the 7.8 million voters had cast their ballots in favor of candidates ranging from socialists to monarchists who opposed Louis Napoleon's regime. Nor did the elections stop the civil unrest in Paris, which featured demonstrations by socialists in the Boulevard Montmartre and violent disturbances in the working-class suburb of Belleville. These riots quickly spread through Paris, night after night, with chants of Vive Roquefort, invoking the exiled editor of La Lanterne, and choruses of the Marseillaise, leading to thrown bottles, broken glass, and flailing police batons. More than 1,000 demonstrators were thrown in jail over the course of a few nights in June. The government became ever less popular when on June 16, troops opened fire on striking coal miners in La Ricamarie, near Saint-Étienne, killing 14 people, including a 7-month-old girl in her mother's arms. Immediately afterward, the silk spinners in Lyon declared a strike. Hotels emptied as foreign tourists hastily left the country, while Rochefort, exiled to Belgium a year earlier, began plotting his return. France appeared to be on the brink of revolution. Matters became even more troubling for Louis Napoleon as his health declined. By this point, his rheumatism was so excruciating that, according to one of his wife's ladies-in-waiting, he would hold his arm to the flame of a candle before entering a room so that a change of pain might bring a sort of relief. Even more concerning was a bladder stone, which gave him sharp pains in the groin as well as troubles with urination. Great risks were associated with a lithotripsy, a procedure involving the insertion of a urethrotomy into the bladder to crush the stone. The hazards were made chillingly clear on August 13, when, drugged with morphine and confined to his bed, Louis Napoleon was given the distressing news that his most trusted military advisor, Adolphe Niel, the Minister of War, had died following a lithotripsy to remove his own bladder stone. 2 days after the catastrophe of Marshal Niel's death, Paris celebrated the 100th anniversary of Napoleon's birth. A Te Deum was performed in the Invalides and a Mass at Notre Dame. The Champ de Mars was filled with puppet theaters, clowns, acrobats, dwarfs, rope dancers, and men on stilts. Fireworks in the sky above the Trocadero included 1,200 Roman candles and 20,000 rockets. Finally, the word Napoleon was spelled in lights above the Arc de Triomphe. As the lights were extinguished a day later, many who watched may have felt the lights of Louis Napoleon's regime were also fading. At any rate was the conclusion soon reached by many foreign observers in the embassies lining the Rue du Faubourg Saint-Honoré. The Second Empire, wrote Lionel Sackville West, charge d'affaires at the British Embassy, has gone off the rails. It is no longer being guided. It is hurling itself at an accelerated speed towards the abyss. That was chapter 27, Flying Gallops. It was like 4 pages. It felt very long to read. But hopefully you found that interesting. And hopefully that displays much better Ross King's writing style. Please let me know what you think. If maybe this made you want to read the book. And if you already have read it, what do you think about the putting Manet parallel to Meissonier as kind of like, what the art world is going through at that time. So I'm going to cut it off at that. Thank you again for listening. If you want to support, like, share, subscribe, comment, and check the video description for further support. Thanks again and have a great day.